Hello, and thanks for joining us for our first Oneserve Talk podcast. We're launching our regular podcast series by first meeting Oneserve Chief Executive Chris Proctor. Over the next few podcasts, we'll be talking to team members, understanding how Oneserve is supporting social housing providers, and looking at what lies ahead for the sector. I'm Stuart. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Stuart.
Right, Chris. So delighted to be kicking off our podcast series with you. So we get down to some basics. So really, I'm going to ask you, how did you reach the position you're in today?
Well, I think some luck of being in the right place at the right time was definitely a contributing factor. I think probably hard work to make sure I was able to step up, a view of wanting to do more and to care. But I think that the senior executive positions are much more open now to people from marketing backgrounds, whereas in the past, typically more people from a finance background. I think marketing people have what is required to be the chief exec now. You know, they are the people who have the vision. They are the people who want to take people along that journey and focus on things like communication, understanding the importance of identity and giving people a higher purpose. And as an individual, I've always wanted to do more. I've always wanted to achieve more. And as I've grown, I focused on bigger problems and wanted to help. It's one of the things that drove me into throwing my hat into politics for a while when I was a young age. And it's certainly a big driver for me now.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I had read your CV beforehand and I noticed we probably had quite a lot in common in terms of CVs and where we've come from. So the purpose of this is just to find out a little bit more about you. So you threw something in there, Chris, of just about your politics. Go on, let's go off on that tangent.
Well, I was 22 at the time, I think it was. And I was living and working in Southampton. The city had been really good to me in terms of giving me opportunities and allowing me to grow. And it was really clear, I think, growing up in the West Country, you're potentially shielded from a lot of this. And when I lived in Southampton for the first time, I was really struck by the social divide. I was really struck by just how stark the difference was. I was very lucky to live in an area called Upper Shirley, and not very far from that, there was areas of real deprivation where life was very different, not just in terms of the divide, but I think in terms of how they were treated and how they were viewed. So I decided in my infinite wisdom that I wanted to do something about it. And the best way of doing that was to get involved in local politics. So I stood as a councillor and was very lucky to be elected, and then spent 4 years as a local councillor serving Millbrook. It was a huge opportunity and it gave me a really strong thirst to do better, to contribute more, and eventually to work more and more around the housing sector.
The purpose of these podcasts is really just understanding what makes you tick. Let's just look at your role at Oneserve. So quite an interesting background. You've gone from the marketing background and then very much what Oneserve does, it works with the social housing sector. You've briefly touched on that in terms of some of the things you might have seen in politics. So how did you make that leap? First of all, just tell me how long you've been at Oneserve and how you came to get that position.
Well, I've been with Oneserve 7 years now. So 2015 I joined. It was a very serendipitous situation, really. I'd spent much of my time in my professional life acting as a bit of a guardian. So throughout my marketing background, a lot of my time has been spent working to support other businesses. So not actually being into those businesses, but to support those businesses, either in my days working in a marketing agency or doing kind of troubleshooting for private equity. It's always been for someone else. And I'd got to a point in time in my career where I wanted to be the parent and not the guardian. I'd met Oneserve previously some years earlier, and the timing wasn't really right on either side. And it was one of those situations where someone phoned me and said, look, Oneserve are looking, would you be interested in having a coffee? And I went, had a coffee, and here I am today.
So as you say, serendipity.
Yeah.
So just briefly talk me about your role a little bit more. So you've been there 7 years. In future podcasts, we're really going to get under the skin of what Oneserve does, but go on, just give me a little bit of a flavour on what your responsibilities are, what you sort of do on a day-to-day basis.
I think my role is probably quite reminiscent of the role of lots of chief execs, both in terms of the roles and responsibilities that we carry, and also, I suppose, in terms of the changes that those roles have gone through in the last probably 5 years, but certainly in the last 2 years. So the classic things. So my role is to provide the vision, the drive, and the leadership of the organisation, to set and deliver that organisational agenda, to help us be the business that we want to be. A lot of it is about trying to understand and make sense of what is happening in the world and what our path from A to B looks like. But more than that now, it's about creating something to believe in. It's about creating a force for good. It's about creating that higher purpose. A lot of my time is spent understanding what's happening, talking to people in the sector, talking to our teams, and understanding what's happening and what we think is likely to happen. But another big part of that is actually supporting people. And I think my role and the role of chief execs has definitely become more of a personal role to the teams that we operate within, far more than it ever has done. You know, the days of chief execs having corner offices and you don't make eye contact with them are long gone. We're as accountable to our employees as we are to our shareholders. And that's something that is a really, really important part of my role, and probably part of the role that takes the largest amount of time.
You just given a little bit of insight about sort of what makes you tick and that sort of passion behind the business. You clearly enjoy the job that you do. It's probably a question I'll ask the rest of the team when we do some of these podcasts. What does get you up in the morning? Just sum up your business philosophy for our listeners.
Do good, do better.
Do good, do better.
Yeah, I think I'm incredibly fortunate, and I recognize that every day, to have the opportunities I have and to be doing what I do. Just to be doing a job I love is an absolute privilege, and that's a big drive. But I think we don't always have the opportunity to manifest change. And when you do have the opportunity to manifest change, it is criminal not to take it. And I think society and the world can be so much better if we all just try to do a bit of good. But also, I think that we have to recognize that that journey never stops. The world is changing at an exponential pace. And it's really important that we set ourselves with that goal of trying to make every day better than the last day. You know, there'll always be bad days. There will always be things that don't go to plan and days that go wrong. But I think having that drive to improve yourself every day, to constantly evolve every day, is a really big thing.
Thanks, Chris. And I think that sort of comes through, doesn't it, in some of the work that Oneserve does. And we're going to be picking that up in the next podcast. And it'll be interesting to see how your business philosophy translates to that. So, as I said, we're going to be talking again in the next podcast about Oneserve, its work in the social housing sector and the difference it's making. Thanks very much today, Chris, for your time. In the meantime, for everyone listening, watch out for more podcasts on our social media channels. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.